Get started. Welcome to everybody. We have an awesome event today with Dane Rogers from OG&E, who has some really great work that he's been doing with his EOP-12 and weatherization team. We saw him in Texas a few weeks ago talking about it and had to have him come here and talk to you all. Curtis Cruz from WECC, who is also on the NERC drafting team for EOP-12, and James Hanson, who's been helping folks in the Northwest and throughout the country, develop their action plans in the field for quite some time. But I'll let everybody kind of introduce themselves really quick if we want to go around in a circle. Dane.
Yeah, absolutely. So as introduced, Dane Rogers. I work for Oklahoma Gas and Electric Company, also known as OG&E. I'm a lead NERC compliance analyst. My background is in field engineering, worked at a lot of our sites, coal burners, some gas plants, a little bit of wind experience. I've also done work, reliability engineering on the distribution system as well, and some experience in other industries. So kind of a wide-ranging engineering background, and have transitioned into compliance over the past 5 or 6 years. So that kind of shapes the way that I approach compliance, and I think we'll see that here in just a little bit. But thank you so much.
Awesome. Curtis.
Yeah, thank you. And great to be here today. Curtis Cruz, Senior Technical Advisor at WECC. You may recognize me from Texas RE. Worked for them for about 14 years or so as their compliance director. For that, worked for a little company called ERCOT. You might have heard of them in cold weather. So before that, I also worked with a local TOP in Texas. So been engaged in operations, EMS, and just the last few years, of course, been in compliance. But glad to be here today to talk with you. And I'll introduce James.
Go for it. You'll do a better job than I did. James Hanson. I'm the manager of operations analysis at WECC. I've been with WECC for 10 years. Before that, I worked with Pacific Corp, like Dane, as a field engineer. Had a lot of that was a great opportunity to give me a taste of many different engineering experiences. One of my favorite things to do was to look at events, determine the cause, and to look for solutions. So when an opportunity in WECC's event analysis department opened up, that's why I made the jump from PAC to WECC, and I've been involved with that work for about 10 years now. Yeah, that's good enough for me.
Cool. Let's get started here. Really quick before we jump in, we did just had a webinar a little bit ago. We can send that around to everybody here. Just give a quick little thumbs up or a send it to me note, and we can send you that. It was how Dominion rebuilt their outage management process. Saw a couple of folks who just show up in here. We're also there a couple minutes ago, and on Friday we have a GADS webinar with APS, Texas RE, and NERC talking about what to expect in 2025, how to make sure the data is correct. Big focus on solar there. And Amit, I'll let you give us a quick little intro about Integ, and we'll get started on some of the EOP-12 stuff.
Yeah, so we do a ton of GADS. We're the leading GADS vendor in the country, but we, aside from GADS, we do a ton of plant automation for real-time outage management, and specifically for compliance, for OMP compliance. So, PRC-12, EOP-12, PRC-4, a bunch of different items that we're doing this for. So I'll include a link later. We have some tools that you can use to automatically calculate your ECWT. Just give us the information of where you want it, and it goes out to NOAA, does everything, tells you if any data is missing, etc. But our entire work is around automating compliance evidence gathering for utilities, so they don't have to do it manually. So,
great. Let's get into it. So, Curtis, I think we're starting with you and what you're seeing from the drafting team.
Yeah, as a member of the drafting team, it's been very interesting to have discussions and look at what the critical nature of the language in the standard is. As we all know, that makes all the difference in the world. Three key items that have been coming up throughout the process is the ECWT, extreme cold weather temperature, corrective action plans, and generator cold weather constraints. So I wanted to hit on some of those things, some of the thoughts from the EOP-12 drafting team, some of the information that we've received from industry and how we're trying to approach it. So please, let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about the first thing, extreme cold weather temperature. There is a definition out there, and that definition was set in play back in 2022, finally approved by the NERC board in February, or actually by FERC in February of 2023. There was some adjudication that happened in June of 2023. And I just got off a call with FERC about this particular definition. Literally 10 minutes before this call, we were having discussions with FERC, and there's not a whole lot of interest at this point to even change this definition. It is a critical definition in determining compliance. And we understand that there's going to be missing data. And when I say we, the industry understands it. There's been opportunities out there. I really appreciate Integ, if that's how you say you were at your company, looking at how to automate that to help folks get through that process. But we understand that this is public data, and the public data is subject to anybody else's data issues. There could be lost data, missing data, could be failures of equipment to record data. There could be weather stations that didn't start to exist until 2006. The key from the ERO enterprise and the key from the standard drafting team is talk about how you addressed some of the missing data. You know, in literally, you get into statistics, and statistics I always believe are lies, big lies in statistics. It's always an opportunity to get into some fun calculations there. But at the end of the day, you want to be able to demonstrate, hey, what happened? Was the weather station out? What happened at that? Was it not available? Did I consider another source? NOAA and NWS and ASOS. We've provided a document within the standard drafting team and updated that with some examples on how to get data. We addressed a lot of the concerns about missing data. We're also working on it on the ERO enterprise side. I am a region, so I'm kind of dual hats in this case, working with the drafting team, trying to ensure the language is what it needs to be in the standard, but also working with ERCOT and the other regions on how we need to approach it. Best practice, keep that raw data, consider more than one source, understand and explain those issues. And it doesn't have to be a dissertation. You saw this is how you approached it. At the end of the day, yeah, there's not a lot of impact to the actual value of ECWT with missing data, depending on where the missing data is. And that is really the key to think about. Let's go to the next slide. And I assume if there are any questions, somebody will let me know. Because I'm not sure if they come up in the chat,
I'll flag it if they come up. I'll definitely
Okay.
flag it when they come up. And yeah, again, just everybody has any questions, put it in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll flag it to Curtis and the team, and we can get those answered.
The next thing is corrective action plans, and note that corrective on the next slide. I'm not seeing it come up, Adam. I don't know if it moved forward or not. Okay, thanks. And when you think about corrective action plans, there is a definition, list of actions, and associated timetable to remedy a specific problem. And corrective action plans come forth in several different requirements in the current EOP-12-3. Really, when you recalculate that ECWT and it happens to go lower, you need to consider the impact on your unit and whether or not there's impacts to freeze protection units for generator cold weather critical components. And you have to develop that corrective action plan within a certain time frame if that occurs. Now, what we have done in R2 is units in design and construction. You are able to create a cap but that cap has to be completed by April 1st, 2028. Now, why is it April 1st, 2028? If you think about what the FERC directive here is, the FERC directive said basically we want everything to be done for a unit before they become operational. Now, we tried to thread that needle between the FERC directive and what they had already approved, i.e. EOP-12-1, and some of the timeframes in there. So you'll see that April 1st in there, it really represents what was in the initial EOP-12-1 reflection of new units. So we're not necessarily changing that. We hope FERC understands that and you understand that. There is opportunities, of course, for grandfathered units to create caps. We understand that there are some units out there that may not be able to meet the ECWT. So you need to put together a corrective action plan per the requirements. And R6 is very specific about a generator cold weather reliability event. Now, that event is based on your ECWT, where it is sitting out there, and what happens at that location. You're able to create a cap within a certain time frame and implement it. There's another FERC directive that said they want it implemented before the next winter season. They suggested December 1st. We maintain that from EOP-12-2. But there's also other units that you need to look at. And there is some concern out there by industry of how expansive that could be. If you're a large company, you may have a lot of units that you need to look at. I will tell you, think about it critically. If you have a generator cold weather reliability event, you're going to understand, hopefully rather quickly, the freeze protection measure that may have failed. And in that case, you already have the requirement to maintain and inspect all the freeze protection measures on generator cold weather critical components on all your units. So you should be able to kind of quickly identify similar equipment at similar locations and develop a cap. Now, will you be able to complete that cap in 24 months? That's dependent upon how many and what the case, how many units you have and what the case is in terms of implementing that freeze protection measure. Understand there also is the extension process. Now, the last thing, who do I give the cap to? The original cap you don't give to anybody. You keep it. That's you and only you. So if you get to the point where you can't meet a timetable, you may have to ask for an extension, and we've created a process. Adam, you've got your hand up. I don't know if that's for question.
I'm not entirely sure why the hand is up and it's not allowing me to take it down. So
Right,
Doom
no
is
problem.
fighting back today. It's ready for Christmas break.
That's all right. That's perfectly fine. But the extension process is to allow you to provide some critical information to NERC. Here again, that was a FERC directive. Any extension to any corrective action plan has to be pre-approved by us. And when I say us, it's the ERO enterprise. We've developed that process. It's out there for consideration. There were some concerns about timelines and whether or not we could hold you responsible for those timelines. We tried to put some timelines in there that seemed reasonable, knowing that there are going to be issues. If your equipment is on a FedEx plane and it crashes in the South Pacific, we know that you're not going to be able to meet your timetable. That is a reasonable opportunity. We also know that there's outages out there and outage windows that get compressed and have been compressed for the last few years. Those are some reasonable expectations for extensions. And we try to line that out within the process. So you don't give the original cap to anybody, you keep it yourself. But if you have an extension, there is a process by which you go through to provide to us. So let's go to the next slide. And I'm trying to go through this quick because I know there's two other speakers here.
Yeah, we actually have one question. This is a great question, I think, from Tricia. Is the review of a corrective action plan going to be auditable?
The review of a corrective action plan internally, if you have a corrective action plan and you develop it and you change timetables that don't extend past anything within the standard, it really is a don't care from a compliance perspective. You have to provide us the cap, but we're not going to see if you change it from December to February unless the standard says you must have it done by time X. and the standard is explicit. And I say explicit, there's 24 months and 48 months in some of the corrective action plans. There's 6 months in the R1, if I recall. And then, of course, the December 1st issue with any generator cold weather reliability event for the unit that had the event. You want to be very careful with that. But internally, if you have to adjust corrective actions and timetables that don't extend past that, it's a simple, do you have a cap? And if there is a cap, if you look at you may have not seen the RSAW. I don't know if the RSAW has been posted. I drafted the RSAW, so I'm pretty familiar with it. We put in some thoughts about the cap and what may be considered out there, knowing that, again, that original cap, you keep it in your back pocket. We may knock on your door to see if there's a corrective action plan. We may evaluate compliance to what the standard says, i.e. the December 1st or the 24 months or the 48 months. But internally, there's not a whole lot there. We did provide a process in the technical rationale. I encourage you to look at that process that covers caps, cap extensions, and the next item, the next slide, which is generator cold weather constraints. So hopefully
there's a follow-up actually from Trisha too, is will they ask to see the corrective action plan?
They may very well ask, yes. That is a very good possibility. I mean, that tells the auditor where you're at in terms of status, especially if in a generator cold weather reliability event, there's that requirement to create one. Or if you have a recalculated ECWT and it's a lower value, and you could or could not do a cap there. It really depends upon how you've done your freeze protection measures. But if you've got a cap, that would be presented. R7 is not listed here, but R7 captures all the caps in R1 and R3. R2 to a certain degree, we expect that those will be done by April 1st, 2028. R6 is separate, but the language between R6 and R7 is very similar, if not the same, with the exception that R6 is for reliability events specifically.
Wonderful. One more question from someone in the audience. Since we calculate the percentile value, do missing data up to some extent change the value that we identified?
I know Dane knows this valuably and deeply. It's where the missing data might be that has an impact. You can play with numbers, play with statistics, and find out where that may be. If it's below the ECWT, it probably has a bigger impact than above the ECWT. When you get into statistics, that was the one book I threw away after college. I loved it, but it's an opportunity here. And I think that's what we have to look at is, okay, does it make an impact on that ECWT? And we know that in the United States, there's some hard lines across the northern part of the United States where the ECWT is at a significant level, especially for wind turbines. We recognize that in the drafting team. We are trying to address a generator cold weather constraint to that effect. But we know that there are some conditions out there where the ECWT it's going to make very difficult for entities to meet in some respects. And so constraints will be used throughout that. But Dane may have some more comments on that. I really do appreciate Dane bringing up the opportunity with statistics and what's happening there. But hopefully we've tried to address the missing data in several locations, the technical rationale, the ECWT calculation, and outreach that we've already provided. I don't recognize that one because that looks like an additional one, right? Basically, that tells you when the timelines, and I don't want to go over this specifically because I'm probably edging into the other two folks' timelines, but that gave you the actions expectations within 6 calendar months, completed by April 1st. When you see developed when identified, i.e. if you have a grandfathered unit and you need a corrective action plan, that's when you should develop it. Don't wait. R6, December 1, 24 months afterwards for the other units. And then R7, which envelops R1, R3, new freeze protection measures, 48 calendar months, existing freeze protection measures, 24 calendar months. Make sure you keep up on operating limitations and cold weather preparedness plan updates while you're developing and going through these corrective action plans.
And we'll be, just as there's going to be a few slides that we kind of skip over, go through quick, we will be able to send you all this deck. If you want the deck, just email me, ashaw@intechconsulting.com, and I'll send it to you. Currently, you will get the recording no matter what. It'll be an automated send once the recording is complete. But if you want the deck specifically to share internally, just send me an email and we'll get it to you.
And I think I talked over the next slide right quick as well. The process talks about the extension request. I think it's important to understand what's there. Again, FERC directive that had us incorporate this. Best practices, plan on your corrective action plans. That sounds silly, but don't wait. It's human nature to say, I've got 24 months to do it. I'll set a due date on the 23rd month and 15th day. I can't suggest you do that. Consider the process, an internal process, how you manage that, how you record, what data you have, how you manage that time frame, whether you put monthly clickers to folks that are implementing the cap, whatever the case may be, and definitely be familiar with that NERC process.
And this is a good time for a quick commercial break-ish here. So Intech, we actually created a EOP-12 automation platform as part of our power suite. I think Amit alluded to this earlier. And what that does is it actually, when there is an event in Pi that is detected that could potentially be cold weather, it's automatically flagged and creates the workflow to remind you and any other stakeholders what they have to do for the corrective action plan. So if you are one of the type of people who is prone to waiting till the 23rd month in the 15th day of the month, this is a great way to kind of say, hey, here's the workflow, here's what needs to be done in timely manner. So yeah, if you want to check that out, just shoot me an email or message me here in the chat, and I can send you a quick link to check it out.
And not to downplay this last one, but constraints, another FERC directive. NERC has to review, evaluate, validate constraints. Anywhere a cap is needed, a constraint may be a possibility. New units after design, you'll notice there's a special one that doesn't require a cap, R2.2 at this point. That doesn't require a cap, but does require a constraint or could require a constraint. In this case, you do have to submit constraints to NERC, and we've built a process. Recommend you take a real good look at that process and what has to happen there. We're trying to alleviate some of the administrative nightmare associated with repeated caps and repeated constraint declarations. We're trying to address that both in the standard and in this process. So just be very aware of this and what's going to happen there. We intend to react as the ERO enterprise as quickly as we can on constraints. I know that was an issue that was brought up. How long do we have? FERC said we have to review, evaluate, and validate. So that takes a little bit of time. Hopefully, if the information is brought to us in such a manner, we can do that rather quickly. In fact, we've tried to do the known constraints in a quicker manner than the case-by-case constraints. And when I say known and case-by-case, go to attachment 1 of EOP-12-3, and there's more information there. But again, the best practice is very similar to caps. Just think about what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. Consider an internal process on how that's developed, how you manage that within your organization, and make sure you review that NERC process. An early submittal is always better in some respects. That gives everybody an opportunity to talk. A lot of discussion points. We want to make sure that it's a collaborative opportunity. And I've taken up more time than probably needed to be, and I'm going to hand it off. But really the key here, the FERC directives were very emphatic. In fact, that phone call just before this, talking with FERC folks, they were like, yes, these are the FERC directives. NERC is in a tough position that they have to meet these directives. remember, the focus is reliability. The only reason we have these standards in place is from a performance perspective on what happened out there. And it may not happen to everybody in the same manner. And this is just trying to ensure consistency across the US on how we approach cold weather. So look forward to further discussions on this, and I'll hand it off to the next speaker, and sorry for taking any extra time. Hopefully I took it away from James.
You took it from me, man.
It is
So
for
it's all
James. So
good.
James is going to walk through his readiness program that I think, James, how many years have you been doing some of these cold weather readiness programs?
A few, and we're relying on some experience from using this same framework that we did for 4 years prior to this. So it's kind of an assurance or a verification type effort. And you know, this screenshot comes from a NERC assessment, you know, on looking for cold weather risks. And if you take a look at the majority of the Western interconnection, and we're in a normal risk area. So you may ask, why is WECC doing some of these cold weather verifications? Well, Winter Storm Elliott report tasked NERC and the regions to perform cold weather verifications. Recommendation 1B tasks us to identify whom we would consider some of the more highest risk generating sites. And recommendation 1C tasks us with performing risk-based site verifications. So that is why that's really the basis of why WECC rolled out this this verification process, and using the assurance framework that we've used for many years. So you know, our selection process included using GAD's outage data, specifically looking for causes due to freezing or cold weather temperatures. We also used the 2023 NERC alert data on cold weather generator readiness to identify there were certain aspects of that NERC alert that we used. And then also inherent risk, where you are within the interconnection, what kind of fuel supply you use, that all went into the selection process. Recommendation 1B was completed in spring of this year, and we're really in the middle of recommendation 1C right now, and we expect that to be kind of a continuous work into our overall generator readiness program that is being developed at this time. But what we do with this, we reach out, we select the units that we want to include in this effort. We send a request for information with some questions. Those responses come in. The team reviews those, determines some follow-up questions. From there, we determine if how we want these to, sorry, I was getting a Teams call right there. We determine how we want to address these follow-up questions, whether it be a virtual meeting, or if we feel we and the entity would benefit from an on-site verification. It's not just entities that have opportunities for improvement that we perform these on-sites for. Sometimes we want to sit down with some of the better performers and sit down and pick their brains. Why do you have such a mature program? And one of the, and that provides a lot of value. And what we are doing with this is we're providing specific feedback to each of the entities that we include in this effort. But then we like to share aggregate findings with industry as well. So what are some of the things that we've taken away from this effort? I think one of the clearest things is that entities in the Western Interconnection, and I know that this is more than, attendees of this call are more than just in the Western Interconnection, but that's where this effort is focused. But one of the standouts is that entities that we've had conversations with are paying attention to what is happening throughout the industry, throughout the nation. And we have sat down with individuals that have dissected the Winter Storm Uri and the Winter Storm Elliott report and looked through the NERC Lessons Learned Library and identified cold weather lessons learned from there. And then they look at their process and they say, is this applicable to us? And then if it is a yes, how does our cold weather plan cover this scenario? And they'll use that as an opportunity to improve their process if it is not clear that their internal or existing plan has those. That is the sign. That is what we wanted to see as a team. A continuous feedback loop that is always looking for improvement. And that's really what really interests me in event analysis is it's synonymous with continuous improvement. Event analysis drives us to say what led to this and how can we be better when we're faced with the same conditions moving forward. So we've had conversations with entities that have practices like that. They're doing their due diligence. They're doing after season postmortems. How did we do? Did we have any outages? What led to those outages? Entities that have fleets of generation, taking the opportunity to learn from other generators' events on the system. You didn't necessarily have it on your site, but there's the potential that you could. So what can you learn from a peer site and improve your plan for your particular site? We talked with entities that say, yeah, we've got a preseason walk down, but anytime we see extreme weather on the forecast, we go through and we do a follow-up. We do a walk down to make sure we're ready for this storm and we're ready to generate when we're in the thick of that storm. So those are the type of things that really stood out to us as a team. As we've had these discussions, as we saw on that screenshot of the assessment before, our team feels like the Western Interconnection is performing well in these cold weather events, not just because of what we're taking from these verifications, but just from experience. Elliott started in Canada in the Western Interconnection and worked its way down through the interconnection. It didn't stall like it did in the Eastern Interconnection. So, we saw a very different part of the storm, but we did see extreme weather there during Elliott. Very little impact in the Western Interconnection. We also saw Winter Storm Heather and Gary earlier this year. And those storms did stall in the Western Interconnection for the better part of a week before moving on. We saw extreme temperatures in our postmortem of that event. We had discussions with some entities in the northeast part of the Western Interconnection with the wind chill factor -70 Fahrenheit. That's cold no matter where you are on this planet. So, and we performed the generation fleet in the Western Interconnection performed very well in those storms. So I don't say that to say relax. I'm saying what you're doing is working, and continue to look for opportunities to improve those cold weather plans, because we've much of the Western Interconnection has been operating in cold weather for decades. I mean, for always. But there's other parts that really could improve on some of their plans. I'm an optimist. I like to focus on the positives, and I've kind of shared some of those positives. But we have noticed some things. There's a difference between a plan that is continually honed in year upon year, regardless of a standard, compared with a plan that is only in place because a standard is coming out. And I'm not saying that, I'm not taking any jabs at the standard or at compliance, but we can tell the difference between a plan that's like, this is 20 years in the making, compared with, we spent the last 18 months working this out. And we only are doing this for a particular reason. Another
I think that's a
standout.
great. I think that's a great note. I just want to highlight too. Having talked to, interviewing probably hundreds of people about how they're doing this, but finding ways to interact with your peers on this is pretty much like you have to do it, right? You can't just live in your silo. I guess you can. It just would be very uncomfortable and very difficult to continue to iterate on it. And just a good plug, we are launching a community to do exactly that. I put a link into the chat below. Check it out. You'll be able to just ask your peers what they're working on, share plans in anonymous fashion, things like that. But I really wanted to highlight the how critical it is to work with your peers, because I hear every day how people feel siloed, and it's very difficult to really find these peer groups to just talk freely about these things. So, seek out the help, seek out other people, ask your vendors, whether it's us or somebody else, your consultants, hey, what are your other people doing? Tons of ways to do that, but definitely make sure you are getting ahead with that and kind of kickstarting that flywheel.
Adam, that's great, because honestly, your plan will progress faster and mature quicker by having those conversations with others. So that's a awesome service that Integ is providing there. So just kind of one final thing that stood out to our team. All of these sites have been selected because there have been cold weather related events and identified within GADS, and some are just very nonchalant about it, and many of them have ECWTs above 32 degrees, and they're saying, well, it's a combination between ambient temperature and humidity, and that takes our cold, our air intakes freeze, and we understand that, but there's some entities are taking further action on than others when facing those type of situations. And so I know I'm running short on time. The last slide is just talking about where our generator readiness program is going. Many other regions are focused really just on cold weather. The West wants theirs to be a little bit more encompassing. We want to be able to include IBR performance. We are getting high penetrations of various different IBR resources, solar, BESS, wind. We want to be able to include that in our generator readiness. It just won't be a cold weather readiness. It will be generator readiness program. It will include heat, just overall readiness of the generation fleet in the Western Interconnection will be free game in this program. And again, it's not related to compliance. I am not a compliance guy, never have been, nothing, but it's reliability and identifying best practices and also opportunities for improvement. And, as we learn together, share great best practices with each other, we all rise to higher performance. So that's what I have, and I'll turn the time over to Dane.
Yeah, great segue to Dane, who is a compliance guy, and he can talk about what this means for folks who have to document all this stuff, make sure it's being done properly. And so Dane, ready to take over.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, don't want to bypass the quote there, James. You want to
Oh,
hit your high
yeah.
point?
Yeah, and it kind of goes in line with what Adam was sharing. You know, we as we learn together as an industry, you know, we grow faster. We progress in the direction we want to go faster. So really one of the highlights of this program is to share what we learn so that entities throughout the nation can really optimize practices. So
yeah, awesome. All right, Dane, ready?
Yeah, no, that's actually a great segue into what I'm going to talk about a little bit here. So first, let me kind of circle back to a few things that James did talk about and how that maybe even helped what I'm about to talk about on this slide. So James spoke a little bit about, you know, the lessons learned and these reliability guidelines and all these things that NERC been putting out. Man, what was the first one? Probably 2011 was the first big cold weather report that NERC put out, and generated some reliability guidelines. And there's a lot of, you know, practices that were recommended and things like that. And that's really where with OG&E that we kind of started our journey with this and making those improvements and implementing these winterization, I don't know, I wouldn't call them best practices, but hopefully at least good practices. And with that, it really informed our conceptual approach here that I'm just about to talk about. But there's a lot of really good work that's in those lessons learned, that's in those reliability guidelines. I believe version 4 of the cold weather reliability guidelines, the most recent NERC one. I heard there's some pretty smart people who worked on that. So go take a look at that, because there is some really good things that can help with your winterization efforts that go above and beyond, but definitely complement the reliability requirements that we're addressing specifically here with EOP-12, currently -2, looking at -3. So talking specifically about OG&E's approach to demonstrating compliance with EOP-12, because, you know, that's part of the game, right? We're all here for ensuring the reliability of the bulk power system, making sure the lights do not go out. And that's the name of the game. And that's, if we get that right, that's the important thing. However, as entities, we do have mandatory and enforceable reliability requirements that we do have to comply with. So number one is making sure that we're ensuring the reliability of the bulk power system. Number two, in this job specifically, there's a lot of other things that take precedent over this even, but we have to make sure that we're documenting the fact that we are doing the right thing. So, you know, whenever EOP really 11-2 started coming about, and then really with EOP-12-1, you know, we formulated this kind of conceptual approach to demonstrating compliance with EOP standards. And the first thing we wanted to do is we wanted to take a look at where our current cold weather plans and actions are sufficient to satisfy new, or, you know, well, in this case, all new compliance obligations. Where are we already doing stuff that all we have to do is go collect the receipt from to demonstrate compliance? There wasn't a whole lot of V's in place. We were doing a lot of great stuff, and this gets into bullet point 2, which is determining where actions may be sufficient, where we're doing the right thing, but we're probably not documenting it in a way that at least easily demonstrates compliance in a manner that you'd want to put forth, you know, evidence into an audit. So that's where the bulk of our work was. This kind of the second bullet here: determine where our actions may be sufficient, but documentation needs to be improved. So we spent a lot of time looking at what we're doing, seeing that we're going out and checking. We don't have a cold weather critical component list per se, but we do have these very robust winter weather checklists that we've been doing, and they check all of our cold weather critical components. So now we have to build this into a list that's, you know, necessary to demonstrate compliance with the standard as required. So that's where we spend a lot of time, is going through and looking at what actions we're currently doing to ensure that we can run through the winter season, figuring out how we can put very straightforward and simple documentation processes in place to basically just collect the data on the work that's already been done, and then collate it into a nice place and make it easy for demonstration of compliance. The last bullet there, we really didn't have anything here except some kind of niche, except for some of the documentation processes. So, right, we had to develop a plan for corrective actions for the cold weather stuff that met the standard, right? When something broke, we fixed it. That was handled through our normal work maintenance program or work management program, but it really wasn't a corrective action plan approach. So we went through and we had to kind of formalize that so it followed the corrective action plan approach. And, you know, PRC4 kind of gives us a nice template for that, the way we handle corrective actions on misoperations. So that was, that was kind of a good analogy, at least to build the process. Even though we were already doing the work, we really had to build the process up around that. So that was our conceptual approach. What did that generate? What did we get out of that? So we already had the first two things already existed. We restructured them a little bit so that it was easier for demonstration of compliance. So on an audit, we could really go one for one and saying, this is how we're doing this requirement. This is how we're addressing this thing. So there was a little bit of restructuring, but all this information already existed, except for, right, of course, like we didn't have ECWTs because that wasn't the thing prior to 2023. But so the very high level of our compliance strategy is we have a generation fleet-wide SOP. This has everything that is needed across all the units. So if something's common, or if it's going to be a reference data point that's not going to be specific to the plant, like the ECWT is specific to the plant, the calculation of the ECWT is not. So, the ECWTs and links to critical component lists. So it's very easy to go look at all of them, see where we have commonalities, see where we have differences between, quote unquote, similar units that are varying degrees of similar. All that stuff is housed either directly or linked into the fleet-wide SOP. There's also procedures, not necessarily the individual steps that each plant needs to take, but procedures for addressing the various compliance obligations. So stating what each facility has to do, not necessarily how they have to do it, but what they have to do. And that's at the fleet level SOP. There's also dates associated with when things have to be done at each facility. I know generator owners who have, various generation sites spread over large footprints, your, especially, some of your legacy plants, they're almost a kingdom and, unto themselves in the way they operate. So we do do afford them the opportunity because they are the experts. We have maintenance people who've been at those sites for 30 years, right? Let's afford them the opportunity to utilize their expertise and not be the guy who says, I'm from corporate, I'm here to help. That's not the approach you ever want to take. So, affording them the latitude to address things as necessary, just putting the guide rails on it to ensure that they're addressing the right things. So that fleet-wide SOP then leads to site-specific SOPs. So each generating site or facility, wind farm, whatever the case may be, it has the specific winter weather preparation activities for that site. So what the operators are actually going to have to go check, what valves the maintenance personnel are going to have to go turn, where insulation is going to have, let's say, we pull transite off of a building at a certain level to allow for ventilation in the summer. Well, we got to put that transite back up in the winter. We got to erect hooches in the winter because we're not going to actually build a structure. Putting scaffolding up and putting some temporary protection up is more than sufficient. It's also, it's cheaper over the life cycle of the plant than building a permanent structure over that. So things like that, that's all listed in there. And then there's methods for, then we have it and it ties it to our work management system, ensuring that, so we use SAP, other people use other things. But, so we have it mandates that the reoccurring PMs have to be in SAP. So they kick out every year on, X date to ensure that this work is getting done. So that's those are the kind of the two SOP level things. That leads to the critical component list, which is linked in the SOP and is dictated by the site specific SOP. So this is what we do is it's pretty straightforward and simple. It is a spreadsheet. It has a tab for each individual facility, and it has a list of all of the critical components for that facility on it. It also has a little yes, no column. Is this component susceptible to freezing due to ambient conditions? Is this component susceptible to freezing due to wind? Is this component susceptible to the accumulation of frozen precipitation? If the answer to that is yes for any given critical component, we list our mitigation measure for that component right there in the critical component checklist. That makes it a one-stop shop. Again, so one plant can look and see what another plant's doing. We do facilitate conversation between them, but it's ease of reference, right? So they're doing this thing for this boiler feed pump. They're doing this thing for this fleet line. They're doing this thing for this, for this ash handling, whatever it is. Okay, cool. That's what we can do too if we don't have something in place for that. At this point in the game, everybody does have stuff in place for that, just to be clear. So that's the critical component list. That critical component list was used to build a critical component checklist. What that is we have a tool called GoPlant, fantastic tool. But what it is, it's digital operator rounds. So the operator, instead of a little clip pad and a piece of paper, they have an iPad or similar device that has their operator rounds listed on it. Oh, I gotta speed up. All right, so the operator rounds on it, they go through and they basically check the box for this. And you go put hands on it, you go verify that critical component's there, right? There's not something crazy that's happened. And then you check the mitigation measures. The mitigation measures are listed on that checklist, right? So this particular cold weather critical component has heat trace, insulation, and flashing on it. That's how it's protected. Well, then they're going to have to verify that that's there. If it's there, they mark yes, it's all good. If it's not there, they have to immediately, before they can close out the round, not right there while they're in the field, but when they get back to the control room, they have to type in the work order number notification that's been created to address that issue. So it gets logged right there. The notification gets logged. It enters the work management, it enters the workflow system, and then that ensures that the work is complete. That moves on. So that goes through for all critical components. Work order tracking. So all work orders created due to critical findings, they get an identifier associated with them. And then they're tracked to completion through, this is somewhat of a manual process. We don't have an automated tool for this, but we pull up everything with that notifier on it or that identifier on it. And it's discussed during the weekly plant manager call until everything is driven to completion. Real briefly, training. This is handled through just a learning management system. It's one of the requirements on there. Training is pretty straightforward. If you have a training program, you put it in place, you track it, you document it, you're good there. On the job is the way to do it, in my opinion, with some supplemental information, and that's how we approach it. Ensure it's being documented. Let's go ahead and go to next slide. This is just really kind of a quick look at our SOP at very high level, right? So you have to have this historical operating data we list right here. We actually have a table. We'll look at the table. So this shows how we do our ECWTs. This is where it's documented. This would be like demonstrating compliance with our requirement 1 and a bunch of the sub bullets in there. One of the things is capability and availability. We just very explicitly state what it is. We are able, we're fully capable and fully available down to the unit minimum operating temperature, which is the ECWT, except for a few instances where we note in table 1 and 2 below. We don't show that here, but that's how we handle it. We're good, except for these very few caveats, and then we have very explicit notes. And those notes are for the BA and the RC, so they can understand where we're deficient here. Deficient may not be the right word, where we have issues here. And that's clearly communicated. Startup considerations, we address it directly. And that's that. Next slide, please. This is just a really quick minimum operating temperature. So it shows how we kind of collected this data and documented it. So for any given facility, we have the facility name, we have what its ECWT is, we have the calculation date of the ECWT, we have the date that data was, then this next date here, sorry. This is where the observed temperature, lowest observed temperature is. This is a demonstration part, right? That we show that our unit can meet that ECWT. We document the date and time that it happened. We also document the location. We use airports. That code right there is just the airport code for, Will Rogers World Airport, TIK, Tinker, whatever the case may be. So we have the temperature, and then we also document the wind and the precip at that temperature. Most of the time when it gets super cold, the wind's not blowing and it's not raining. Occasionally it is. We document what that is so we understand, so we know, but also so the BA and the RC, whenever we transmit to this, they understand what the potential impacts to our units are. This is really more, these last 3 columns really have value for wind resources more so than traditional generation, because once big generation's on, if you've done your stuff, as long as it's hot, it runs. Next slide, please. Another thing, this is just, site specific SOP a little bit. So this is, the site, this is driven by the fleet wide SOP. But this is the site specific SOP. This is all the things that they have to have done prior to September 20th of that year to at least start their preparation for the winter season, right? Like it's an ongoing thing, but there's stuff you need to have done by September 20th, because in Oklahoma, it can freeze on September 21st. It can also be 100 degrees on September 21st. So, we can't do everything, but we can be prepared. So that's really what this is ensuring. Next slide, please. This is just a list of our critical components. This is our critical component list, how we handle it. It's a sampling for a specific site. So you can see the critical component list. Sometimes we have individual things listed out. So we got a trip valve listed out. We also have an entire skid listed out. So if it's a big old system that's all one thing, we call it out as one thing. If it's an individual valve that may freeze, we call that out individually. Now we say, what kind of heat loss is this thing susceptible to? And what do we do to mitigate that? For these, we're just building temporary shelters around these things. Some of them, it doesn't matter if ice builds up on or not. So it's no there. Some of them, because they're insulated and flashed and all this thing, wind doesn't cool them down. That doesn't matter. There's no necessary, there's no specific mitigation measure for that. But it can just, over time cool off, or it can get, ice can build up on it, and we mitigate that. And that's a concern, and that's how we document it. Next slide, please. This is just really quick. This is what the critical component checklist looks like. So you can see everything. I think this is actually a different site than what we just looked at, but you can see every single critical component has its own little box in the most left-hand column. Then we ask some questions about it. Is it susceptible to freezing? Yes. If that answer is no, it wouldn't be on here, but we have to have something to generate this. And then we mitigation measure in place. We'll verify insulation and the heat in the drum room is on. Is it? And so that's the mitigation measure. And the other two are no. And then that's what's implemented. So that addresses it. If any of these, if there should be a yes and it's a no, it flags it as yellow and it makes them enter that. It looks like there is an example of that. It may have got cropped. So that's that one. Next slide, please. More quarter tracking. I really don't want to talk about SAP. It works. You put your stuff in it, and then training is tracked by our LMS. We can go with next slide. Okay, so this is kind of, this maybe simplifies everything I said. So we knew what we wanted, right? We wanted to be able to demonstrate that we were able to ensure the reliability of the bulk power system through winter weather. So that was our mind, right? We got to demonstrate compliance, and we've got to be doing the right thing. Okay, so that's it, right? We're doing the right thing. We can demonstrate it. Awesome. Looks like that is Curtis's contact information.
Yeah, so just a couple of
go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna just kind of run through some stuff. We can all stick around for a little bit longer if we want to answer any questions for people who are still able to. But just before other folks start to log off, I wanted to just put some of the contact info here. Again, if you want this slide or this whole deck, just email me ashot@insightconsulting.com. I'll send it to you. I'll send you any of the links. We do have a upcoming GADS webinar I mentioned at the beginning. And then, yeah, Dane, do you have any Q&A for Dane and what he's doing at OG&E right now?
Yeah, while anyone's getting that in, I was just going to say, if anybody has any questions, the folks in Integ do have my contact information, so just reach out to them. They can put you in touch with me. I'm more than happy to field any questions about what we're doing.
Awesome. And if, we'd love to show you guys what we're all working on our automation compliance. Check out the integconsulting.com/extreme cold weather, or scan that QR code. A lot of the stuff that Dane's talking about here with taking the data, building a corrective action plan. We automate a lot of those workflows to make it much faster, much more reliable, and automatically create the evidence in case of an audit. Yeah, so if there aren't any Q&As for everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We do have several more webinars coming up. We'll do about three of these every single month for compliance, for NERC, for outage optimization, all sorts of different topics that you folks at Generators are dealing with every single day. And of course, don't forget to check out the Power Community. That's something that's going to be launching here at the end of January. We've had it launched for pretty much the wait list for about 12 hours, and we've already got about 15 signups for that. So it's starting to happen pretty quickly. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming. And yeah, we'll see you guys around.